It's the 31st day of May, 2015, and this is The Radical Agnostic. Broadcasting from my apartment in Tucson, Arizona, in the heart of the Sonoran Desert. Guys, everyone from other parts of the country and the world right now, we've been laughing at you for the last 6 months because it never got colder than like 65 degrees in the dead of winter here. But now's your chance to laugh at us for the next 5 months because it's already 100 outside. So you're going to hear the air conditioner because that's just how it has to be. My name is John. My co-host is Mark.
Hello.
The stowaway guest is here, Bryan Richter, everybody.
Hello.
And our guest. I am particularly honored and pleased to invite or present Dr. Mays, a PhD in cellular and clinical neurobiology, currently teaching at the U of A, University of Arizona. Dr. Mays, welcome to the show.
Hello.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I also teach at Pima.
You do?
That's my primary.
Oh, Pima, right.
Yeah.
But you are at the U of A.
Part-time.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got that right by mistake. Okay, I told this young lady named Megan Shaughnessy, she was our 100th person on Facebook to like the Radical Agnostic page, so I'd give her a shout-out. So, Megan, thank you very much.
Yay.
And everybody else who shares the show and clicks on the things and whatnot. This is going to be awesome, guys. We're going to pack a lot in today. A lot of science questions for our guest. So, talking about the weather, Dr. Mays, was it hotter? You're from Iraq, by the way, right?
Yes. I was born in Baghdad, and around the age of 13, my parents decided to leave Iraq, so we came, my parents, my sisters, to Michigan.
A little closer to the mic, sorry.
Yeah, we came to Michigan. Yes.
Go ahead. What year was that when you left?
We left in 1993.
93, so after the first Gulf War.
That's right. Yeah.
So you were there during that. Nothing ever happened in Baghdad, though, did it? Or was there bombing or anything?
I mean, there was bombing, but it was, I think the first Desert Storm, the first war was mild. So
Yeah.
people in Baghdad, we heard bombs, and we definitely knew something was happening, but nothing.
Didn't disrupt
Yeah,
life too much?
I don't think, from what I remember, it was more out in the desert that it happened. Saddam's troops had gone out there.
To Kuwait.
Right.
Yeah.
It was further out. They didn't, U.S. forces didn't really go into the city as far as I know.
Did it disrupt life? Yes, because the power was
That's
cut off.
Yeah.
Water was affected. Transportation.
Wow. Was it hotter there than it is here in the summer?
You know, people ask me the question, and I don't remember.
It's just hard to tell.
It's hard to tell because
Very similar climate, isn't it?
it is very similar climate. As a matter of fact, when I moved to Tucson, I felt the streets reminded me of Baghdad, the climate, but I don't remember if it was hotter.
Yeah.
Not the palm trees there. I'm imagining they have them. Are they more the ones with dates actually on them?
Oh, yes.
Because like most of the ones here don't have dates.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these ones here, some guy came in here and planted those like 100 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not.
Well, the ones in California too, like the whole entire area. Yeah.
Oh, they're from like the Caribbean, or are
No,
they
they're
from the Middle East?
From the Middle
really?
East. And they planted them out here to. I forget. I can't remember why exactly they did that. But they also, the same guy brought camels out here and tried to introduce camels.
Oh, really?
Into the area too. Yeah. And
Introduce camels?
Well, like as like instead of horses, instead of like
as pack animals.
Yeah, as pack
When
animals.
was that? Was that like
1800s
Oh,
sometime?
1900s. I was going to say, can
Like
you imagine
the-
what the Lakota Sioux would have thought of a camel?
A camel.
What the
No,
fuck
it was
is
like
that
in the
thing?
early 1900s or late 1800s, I think.
Jeez
So it's
Louise.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's
man.
a place called Dateland
Yeah,
on, I think it's on the
right
way,
on the border.
Oh.
and it's remarkable. They have so many different. Type
Is that
of-
out towards California?
Yeah.
Like out on the 8?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, what's the main language that's spoken in Iraq?
Arabic.
Arabic.
Yeah.
So it's modern Arabic, which is distinct from classical Arabic. Is that true?
Yes.
And that classical is more like a literary of like older text and stuff.
Yeah.
Was it a spoken thing too?
It was, but now just, people have different dialogues.
Is
And
it
it's-
completely different than classical Arabic? Like modern Greek is completely like they can't read ancient Greek in Greece. You know, like
Oh no, it's not. I mean, you're taught in school.
Oh, yeah?
Classical Arabic.
Okay.
and- yeah.
Arabic. Okay, so then, but you, I know, like in most developed countries and everything, that they grow up watching American TV and stuff. So everyone kind of has like a minor grasp in English, even if they don't try. Was that the case? Did you watch American or British shows?
No, we had 2 channels.
One and
one
two.
was the news, and the other one was it turned on limited hours during the day, and it was an educational channel.
Oh, okay. Was it all kind of state controlled, the media?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I guess my introduction to the English language, I went to a private school,
Mm-hmm.
and I took French. So I was introduced to a foreign language.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I came to this country that I had to learn it.
Really?
Yeah.
So did you speak French when you got here?
When I got here, I spoke French.
Oh, you're like, man, I speak 2-3 languages, but none of them
Yeah,
are the one I need right now.
Yeah.
Can we have gone to France?
Yeah.
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 So the French teacher at the high school was very helpful. She would go with me to different classes and translate. And as I started acquiring the English, I started losing the French.
Well, can you imagine a teacher doing that now? Going to classes with the student and translating for him?
Yeah. No. Was it?
I had remarkable teachers.
Yeah.
I had a calculus teacher that would stay with me after class and would practice English with me.
Now, is that a private school that you're going to here too?
No, it was
Okay.
public school.
It's public,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
even more amazing to me that you ran into teachers like that in a public school.
I found French very difficult. Like I took German, Spanish, and French over my years, and French was the hardest for me.
Really?
Yeah, I think there's just so many exceptions to all the
Yes.
rules. But it's kind of funny that I say that because English blows that out of the water in terms of exceptions, right? To
Mhm.
pronunciation and rules and verb conjugation and everything. So was English harder than French?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember learning English. I remember not speaking it and crying.
Yeah.
I cried so much. Because imagine, I mean, you're a prisoner. You can't.
Right.
Play with the other kids and stuff.
And then I remember speaking it. So I don't remember. I think it was so traumatic that I just blocked it out. Yeah.
See, I learned to speak German like fairly well before I left, and I
Well,
mostly lost it. But I felt the same way. Like I went downtown, I wanted to talk to people, and
Yeah, it's immersion though, so that's
Yeah,
obviously the
lot
best way
easier,
to
yeah.
learn, and that's why when I was learning Spanish, I'd never immersed myself, and I was always too self-conscious to speak to people, even though I became what I did was read books in Spanish and news. I would read the news every day and translate it, and I got to the point where I was fluent in reading. I could read. I was reading Jorge or Gabriel Garcia Marquez and all these great Spanish writers, and I could just read the book, and I was really happy with that. But I could never. I couldn't speak. I mean, I maybe could if I had to, but I was always too embarrassed. This is only a couple years ago.
90% of the academy is Spanish speaking.
I know.
Like you could easily.
I could easily
practice.
learn. And I've always had people in
Literally.
my life that speak Spanish.
Literally, like 90% of the people we train jiu-jitsu with speak Spanish.
Yeah.
But it's all
He
ow.
he always speaks to
Ow.
him in
It's
English.
all ow, ow, stop.
No, that's me. That's all in English.
What I have a bunch of biology questions and fringe theories that I want to run by you, but before we do that, what issues in biology are currently the most fascinating to you right now, or were in the course of your studies?
Wow, that's a tough question. Well, anything with the
brain.
brain is going to be fascinating.
Great. I can't wait to talk about that especially.
It's just the nature of the questions, and the brain is trying to solve the questions about the brain.
Yeah.
I am, in the recent years, I started looking into the immunology,
Okay.
so the immune system, and it's remarkable.
Those were my two favorite
Yeah.
parts of the class. Yeah, the immune system, and you told me it would be because I really like the neuro stuff, and then,
Yeah.
then you said, "Oh, hang around for the."
And that's what
immune
makes diseases like HIV so insidious, is that they attack the immune system, so then you end up dying from some other illness, right?
Yeah, like an illness that's
That wouldn't normally kill you.
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and then definitely the heart and the cardiovascular
Yeah.
system, and I suppose the connection between the heart and the brain.
Right.
Which, I mean, Aristotle talked about the heart long before we started looking into.
Yeah.
And he said it was the seat of consciousness, and we discarded that. But then we're not really sure what consciousness is.
Well, let's jump right into that then, and if you can, just get as close to the mic as you can. And I was talking to my friend Greg, who was on episode 4, and he and I, especially him, were very interested in consciousness studies and altered states and the biology and the science of it, of course. Now, the dominant theory, and just everything I say, just jump in and tell me when I'm wrong, okay? But the dominant theory right now in sort of materialist science, if you can call that the mainstream, is that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain function. In other words, the brain has all these little lights and gizmos going on, and consciousness emanates from that sort of as a mistake or just a symptom of that stuff. And that's very important for the materialist and sort of atheist scientists to believe that, because they don't want to concede any non-physical reality, basically. So, and now I'm very interested in this because it's my contention that this consciousness is the byproduct of brain function theory is misguided and wrong. And that another way of describing it could be that consciousness is something like a field, or something that's ever present, and that the brain's function is to receive that signal, almost like an antenna from a radio. And so, have you thought about it in this way? And do you think that consciousness is a byproduct of brain function, or is its own, or is brain function just one aspect of consciousness?
So actually, my background is in philosophy.
Oh, mine too.
So I went to the University of Michigan. I majored in philosophy. I wanted to go to graduate school to do my work in philosophy. I was going to go to Purdue University. And then I took 2 classes. I was ready to graduate, and I took philosophy of consciousness. And I was fascinated and equally frustrated by the assumptions and the lack of empirical epistemology. So I thought, I am going to learn about the basic science.
Yeah.
I made an appointment with a neurobiology instructor, and I thought, can you teach me the basic science? Of course, he laughed at me because you can't learn it during an office hour. But we started reading Antonio Damasio's The Feeling of What Happens. And it's about the brain, and it's about the emotions, and is it the chemical signals that translate into that. So fast forward, I don't know, 5-6 years. I went to graduate school. I got my degree in the basic neurobiology. And I realized that I'm not sure we could solve that question because the nature of it is so experiential.
Mm-hmm.
So I am, it's tough when you say, is it something that the brain receives? Well, what is that thing? Can we capture it?
Right.
But equally frustrating are the materialists that reduce everything to chemicals at the synapses. Because if that's the case, then why don't we all have the same
experience?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the materialist project basically is reductionist. In other words, it says, here's consciousness, here's experience, driving down the street, falling in love, getting pissed off, skinning your knee.
They reduce it to chemicals and electrical impulses.
They reduce it to chemicals and electrical, and they say, look, if I can find a part of your brain that lights up when you think about something, or if I can poke your brain with a stick and a memory will pop up vividly into your mind, which they can do, then that just shows all you are is a squishy sponge in a skull casing. And so that shows that. But Alan Watts, the philosopher I was listening to the other night, was talking about that. And then he was saying, all you're doing is explaining one part of that experience. And yes, the squishy sponge is one part, but where do you get off, or what justifies you saying all it is that?
Because there is the explanation of it, the feeling of really what happens.
And that's a whole other aspect.
And if it is the same, a surge of dopamine or an activation of your visual cortex, then why do I describe the experience differently than you do? So there is something else to it.
Right. And I mean, Alan,
why do some guys suffer from PTSD and other guys don't?
Right. And there, I mean, there's paranormal stuff too, and that's all very iffy. But there are things like, let's not get into that stuff. But there are things like remembering other experiences or knowing what someone's going to say before they say it, and things
like
intuition, which whatever that is, which I think is just like a light psychic effect, basically.
Yeah.
Well, and it can be learned too. Intuition. I mean, you can pick up unspoken signals and stuff, and understand. And so there's a physical aspect to it as well. But Alan Watts was saying this reductionist thing really exposes the attitude of the person who's saying it. So when you get a materialist who's saying it's just neurons and chemicals, it reveals the motivations behind that. The person wants to, in a way, take you down a notch. They want to take humanity's experience down a notch and say all it is this. Because with music, you could say, and you would be completely right, all it is a progression of notes.
Right.
And the notes are just vibrations in the air at this frequency. All it is notes and vibrations. But with music is so powerful that people aren't tricked by that. No one's going to be like, yeah, that's all it is. I don't like it anymore. There's the whole thing of hearing it in its entirety and feeling something because of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the materialist would argue with me that these are just poetic things that I'm saying, but that in the end, all it is these things. But
they explain that emotions are nothing more than chemicals.
Chemical reaction.
And I think this correlation is not causation comes into this, because they can correlate a feeling with a chemical, but can they tell us that the feeling is caused by the chemical?
Yeah.
So here's a direct way of addressing this issue in one question, because I can't find this.
See, I think no.
Go ahead.
Because you have to have a stimulus before. It's not the chemical that creates the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response happens, and then the chemicals
because
happen.
of the experience.
You have to have a fear exposure or a threat to your life and limb before that happens. So it can't be the fucking chemical causing the emotion. The emotion preceded that chemical for damn sure. Because I never got jacked up before a bear jumped out of the bushes at me. It was after the bear jumped out of the bushes at me that I got jacked up.
It's an experience which you had to have intelligence to interpret.
Right.
Like if you were a bug and that bear came out, you wouldn't be scared at all. Because you don't have the intellectual capacity to see the bear and know that it's dangerous.
Yeah, especially when it's
let me ask some basic questions. So, is consciousness, are people relegating that to just humans, or
No.
do people say animals have consciousness?
I think everybody agrees that animals have consciousness.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then the all consciousness is
The
someone,
reductionist.
yeah, poking your brain or whatever. So does that mean that the experience didn't have? Are they trying to say that it's kind of like a matrix thing, and there's not really reality in experiences?
I wish I could do justice to their belief, but the philosopher Daniel Dennett, he does say something like that. He says consciousness is a kind of illusion or a false feeling. It's really I can't even wrap my head around it. I just feel like it's so fundamentally wrong. But some of them do say what you're saying, which is that it's not real, and others will say, well, it is real. It of course we really experience this, but
it's nothing magical. It's
Right.
nothing beyond the intangible,
Yes.
the empirical.
It's nothing non-physical. In other words, it's,
Right.
Yeah, that's not romantic enough for me. I'm not buying that shit.
Me neither.
You know,
'Cause
and
I feel things at times that I know other people don't,
Yeah,
because they don't do the stuff I do, so I know they don't feel those same things.
Yeah, but I mean, in their defense, like a lot of I never wanted to believe that my moods or emotions were chemically, or caused or fundamentally chemical reactions. But when you're like, if you drink a lot the night before and then the next day you're not happy and something annoys you and stuff, or you get in a fight with your girlfriend just about something that you wouldn't have been mad about otherwise, or if sugar is a huge psychoactive drug, and we all eat tons of it. So if you're a big sugar fiend and then you get off the sugar, you might have really bad moods, and I've experienced that. So I do accept that a lot of what I feel is chemically determined.
oh yes, yeah, we don't disagree.
Yeah.
But the consciousness is something else.
Completely.
Yeah, and to limit it to just chemical reactions, I think we're selling ourselves short as humanity.
Now, my big question for the materialists out there, and I think a guy actually, this guy Eddie is friends with Matt, who is on the show, and he's listened to all the shows, and he's getting really amped up. He's an atheist, and he thinks he can defend atheism much better than Matt did, because Matt actually kind of had an open mind. And but this guy, I don't know if he's open-minded or what he is. I think he's probably a decent guy. He's friends with Matt, so we're going to have him on the show to defend this materialist atheist agenda and give us. But so my question for that group, though, and for a scientist, so I'll direct it at you, is how do normal scientists, mainstream scientists, explain the placebo effect? Because for me, this is huge. This is belief altering the physical world. So in other words, they give people a sugar pill. They tell them it's an antidepressant, it's anti-anxiety, antibacterial, antibiotic. They'll tell them anything, and a certain percentage, about 20 to 30% of the population, will respond and get better by taking nothing.
But
because they believe that it's something.
But is that actually healing those people, or do maybe the 20 to 30% of the people that are in the study that are taking it aren't really sick to begin with? And it's psychosomatic.
Or their immune system just responds.
Yeah, I mean, that gets into the holistic aspect of healing. So the immune system kicks in.
So like maybe that was one of the baseline B cells that recognizes pathogens, like they already had that, so they see that pathogen, it recognizes those epitopes right away and attacks it, and that's maybe why they get better with the placebo, because their immune system was already a step ahead, because they had already created one that was waiting for it.
But why then would taking the pill of nothing start that process. And
Because
to answer your question,
what I'm
Mark,
saying is maybe it was going to happen anyway, and it just
accidental
Well,
healing.
but here's the thing.
no intentional
When
because your
you-
immune system's trying.
Right, but it would have done it anyway, even if you hadn't taken
even
it.
you hadn't taken the pill.
But
I'm not sure. I mean, because when they take the placebo, then there is that optimism. I'm going to get better. And that plays a role into the physiology. I mean,
think
when we're
that's-
stressed, what happens? Our immune system is going to respond. Our immune system is weakened. So, in a way, you're doing the opposite. You're adding positive
right.
feelings. And
Now, to answer your question, though, Mark, it's definitely established that it's not what you guys were talking about, accidental healing. Like they would have healed anyway, but they took the pill. It's too many. The trials are too huge. Millions and millions of trials, and they start taking the thing, and they get better. They heal, and it's a range of all kinds of things: emotional problems, gut pain. And especially, and I'm going to get into this in a little while, skin issues. Skin issues respond very well to placebos and behavior type treatments.
I wonder if.
But my question was more about the feeling, the emotion, or however your thoughts and how it affects your body. And so I'm not quite denying that, but what I'm saying is, so maybe these people were psychosomatically sick. They weren't really sick. And they could have done that through negative feelings or whatever you want to say. And then they had this positive, then optimism thing come along that reacts to that and changes that over. And then suddenly they're better. Meaning they were never physically actually sick or had some actual disease that was affecting them.
I'm sure
because
that does
it's
happen.
hard for me to believe. Like I can believe lots of stuff about positive energy or negative energy or thoughts or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But there's certain things that I don't care what you think about them. You're not going to change them by thinking about them. If you're starving in Africa, you start thinking about food. You're not going to make yourself all of a sudden not be starving.
But this one is
if
different.
you're a child with AIDS,
Yeah, but there's a
you're not gonna
physiology to starvation, though. It's not just a feeling; it's a physiology.
So
like it hurts.
this one is different. You're not thinking, "I'm going to get better," but you think, I have the medication, and so your body, prior to having the medication, you were stressed out, you were worried, will I get better? And then you shift that, and your body's gonna work with that new feeling.
And it's been
I understand that, but still, I'm saying I think there are things that are beyond your control.
Certainly.
And whether you want to think positive about it and whatever does not mean that, I could think all day long for the next 10 years, I'm going to be rich. And doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be rich.
No, and no one's just saying that you can just snap your fingers and think things into existence. Like Bugs Bunny walks off the cliff, and he still walks because he doesn't know there's a cliff.
Right.
And he's walking on air for a little while till he realizes he's not standing on it. No one's saying that. And what you're saying, I'm sure, some of this population of placebo people that work is probably what you're saying. They weren't sick to begin with. And without solid evidence in front of me, I can confidently tell you that the trials are so extensive and for so many different illnesses that many of these people are legitimately ill, demonstrably through tests, blood tests, however you determine illness, it's determined. So, and placebos do work on some of those people. And so that's why drugs...
It would be interesting to look at that population, that 20%, and see what is different about them.
Well, what's interesting is that it's this...
Do you think there could be like a physiological difference somewhere in there that gives them an advantage? Because if stress can bring down your immune system, then feeling good... I would think because of the balance that the body always tries to create, that feeling good would have to have a similar effect in the opposite direction, even if you're just talking about like an emotional negative feedback loop.
I would want to know what is, if there is anything physiological different, but also demographics and just background. If
are they easily men than women? Is it older
are they
people?
easily influenced?
Right.
And I honestly think that probably that
look at
is
IQ,
true.
maybe stuff like that, even.
Yeah, but IQ
Because
is not really...
I've seen stuff like,
not
we're going to
very-
give you a calm down pill. I worked in group homes and stuff. We give them a little vitamin C tablet. They chew it up and be chill for hours. They think they got a calm down pill.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more into this placebo effect. When they're trying to do like anti-anxiety placebo, they'll give you a blue-colored pill. And capsules work better than pressed pills, and injections work better than capsules. And
So what are they injecting you with? Sugar water?
Yeah, water or saline solution.
solution.
Yeah. And so injections work the best.
Probably because it's more...
It's authority.
Yeah,
It's this
yeah.
feeling that...
That's going right in my blood, man.
I mean, Darren Brown, the great English illusionist, did an elaborate thing where he took these 4 people who had these horrible fears. One guy was like heights, another guy couldn't go out in public, etc. And he had all this money from the BBC to do the show, so he built this abandoned building, he turned it into a lab, and he had doctors walking around, and they were all actors. And they brought them in and showed them, we're going to give you trials on this new drug. And this new drug makes your fears go away. It stops fears, and they've been using it in Afghanistan for the U.S. troops, but now they're going to release it to the public, so they're doing clinical trials. It was all false. It was all fake. But these 4 people didn't know it. So he gives them the injections and everything, and he has them take pills a certain times a day and everything, and he keeps checking up on these people, and all 4 of them overcome their fears. This one guy walks across a bridge, couldn't do it before. Another guy, they stage a fight where he's at the bar with his friends, and this wimpy, terrified guy jumps in and helps his friend and holds back these ruffians who are also actors, but he didn't know that. And it was awesome. So just showing the power of the placebo effect.
Now, I wonder what would happen if they found out that it was a placebo.
They did. He told them at the end.
And then...
And some of them backslid a little bit, and then like two of the 4 were fine after being told that, and 2 of them, in fact, the one girl who couldn't sing in public, she was a really good singer, but she just couldn't sing in front of people. She kind of never got over it really. She tried, and she went out and did like busking on the street, but she was just terrified and stuff. So yeah, and there's another trial. This wasn't some crazy elaborate hoax like the Darren Brown thing, but this lady had horrible gut pain. They gave her a placebo for several weeks, and then it got better. And then they told her it was a placebo because she stopped taking it, and the gut it came right back, all of her pain. And then so they told her it was a placebo, and then she kept taking it, and it worked again, even knowing that it wasn't real. Just taking the pill 4 times a day, helped her. And the interesting thing is that placebo works in about 20 to 30% of cases. That's the same percentage that hypnosis works on. So about 3 out of 10 people can be hypnotized very deeply. And then about 30% can kind of be hypnotized, and then the rest of us just can't. And so that's an interesting correlation too.
Well, so for the fear thing, I mean, I'm not doubting what you're saying at all, but for me, that doesn't show the placebo effect as much as show. I mean, that's still again negative thoughts or positive thoughts, and how that influences you and how you think, and I completely buy that. Like so, because fear is in your brain.
It's not
fear
medical.
Is something. It's not medical. It's thoughts that you think because of your experiences. You're afraid of something now because of something that happened. So then, for you to be told that, oh well, with this,
this pill takes away fear.
Takes away your fear. I could completely buy that. But my problem is when it's like, and maybe all disease is just that. Maybe there aren't really physical real physical manifestations, and it's just all thoughts and whatever. Because I mean, I can see if you just sit around and think negatively all the time, and you have stress and whatever, you're gonna cause yourself some physical harm, I'm sure, or physical effects that you're have upset stomach or you're whatever. But I mean, just for me, it's you have cancer or you have diabetes or you have many other AIDS, blah blah blah, Ebola, and you're gonna think, no, I'm getting rid of this. I'm gonna fight this, and then
The fact is, though, that there is a small proportion of people who do get over those demonstrably illnesses, where I'm telling you they have a blood test and they have a virus or something like this, or horrible like warts on the skin, and they get hypnotized and it goes away. It's been shown many times. It doesn't always work. In fact, it usually doesn't work. This placebo, but it sometimes does, and that's what's interesting. That's what we're talking.
Well,
about.
20 to 30% of people is enough to be interesting to keep you looking at it.
Any drug has to be measured against the placebo effect. It has to work better than the placebo effect to be approved by the FDA. So it's a scientific reality.
Well, I didn't even know that was a measuring stick.
Yes.
I just learned something.
I'm just maybe more of a doubting Thomas than you guys, because I want to see more empirical evidence.
I never would have guessed that in these 14 shows.
Like maybe it's misdiagnosis. Maybe it's all kinds of,
I'll bring some hard evidence for you next time. Here's a theory.
I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I'm saying the reason that it happens, I'm not buying yet that it's because of the way you think, because you thinking positively changes.
And what we're saying is you thinking positively influences some of your systems, like the immune system.
Particularly, so the immune system cures the illness, but you allow.
We know that the brain is communicating with the rest of your body, including the immune system, which is in charge of curing the illness.
I mean, think about blushing. You're embarrassed and you blush. That's a physical reaction that happens from an emotion. Things actually happen in your skin.
Do we consider is lust an emotion?
Sure, yeah.
Because there's a serious physical reaction to that.
Right, yeah, the engorgement of the glands and whatnot.
We kept that shit pretty scientific.
I have to speak in a British accent when I... the engorgement of the glands.
No, okay. I'm not denying any of that. I'm not denying that thinking positively or negatively has effects on the human body. I'm just saying, unless these diseases are more manifestations of your thought process or whatever than actual physical things that affect some people's bodies.
And you know, some traditional Chinese practitioners believe that at the heart of every illness, there is a mental aspect.
Now, here's a theory by a biologist, okay, who that would help to explain why maybe this placebo thing is real and does have physical effects on real physical diseases. I watched the whole lecture again last night, and I jotted down notes to try to run through this theory. Now, everyone out there, I've had a lot of people tell me they love the show, but that I talk too much, and it's so true. But I'm not a great interviewer yet, so that's all I know how to do to keep things rolling. But I'm going to try to really briefly say these points, and I want you to jump in at any time, because you're a cellular biologist, so this is your thing. This is all about cells.
Okay. This
is Bruce Lipton, and he's a biologist, and he has this whole thing called the biology of belief. Now, disclaimer, this guy is doing lectures and selling books, and this does have all the sort of smells and sounds of a pseudoscience, biology of belief. I mean, it might be that, but
so let's talk about that. Why pseudoscience?
Well, all these fringe theorists get accused of pseudoscience.
So it's pseudoscience because perhaps it lacks the empirical, the numbers.
Yeah, and that's why he's so detailed that if these things are right, these actual things he says about cells, then it kind of would seem that he's right. So he's not using like flowery words, in other words, that don't mean anything.
Okay.
What was I going to say? All right. He starts off usually talking about genes and DNA. And the common beliefs about genes and DNA, as we all know, coming up through the 80s and 90s, were that your genes are who you are. They affect who you are. They affect your behavior, your sexuality, all these things. So during the 90s, as the Human Genome Project was going on, they believed that once they cracked this code and find all of human DNA and map it out, they're going to be able to cure any disease, any illness. They're going to, change the way people think.
So let me interject here.
Yes.
So the real hardcore geneticists did not believe that.
Okay.
Because they knew that the story is a lot bigger.
Okay.
They knew that we're merely going to get the code. It doesn't mean we're going to
be able to tap in and change everything.
In other words, they knew that there are other factors.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because what was going on was an economic bubble.
Mm-hmm.
These biotech companies were getting huge, and all these investors who weren't scientists were pouring money into biotech in the 90s.
Funny you mentioned that because 10 years after the Human Genome Project was published, I think it was Nature or Science magazine, they put out a survey to scientists, to clinicians, to biotechnologists, different fields, and they asked them, how much has the Human Genome Project advanced your research? And by far, it was the biotechnologists that benefited the most.
Right.
Okay. In other words, they had to, like you said, the biotechnology field.
Yeah.
Okay. But clinicians, it didn't.
Yeah.
People who actually treat illness and disease didn't help them at all.
Now, undoubtedly, it gave them a stepping stone. It has,
That was something I heard on the radio the other day. Was there? I forget if it was on BBC or NPR or whatever. They're talking about the ears that they're growing on mice. And supposedly the clone of the sheep dolly or whatever.
Right.
And they said that in both those cases, since then, they haven't advanced those things at all. They've had if you look at what they've done, they've just had a mass of failings. Of failures.
Cloning is illegal in a lot of countries, so it holds back research. But I think there's a Korean scientist who's trying to get the rights to clone humans. And I think they kind of can, or they're right on the verge of being able to do that.
well, until you see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a sheep is pretty complex.
Well, but the ear growing on the back of the mice too. They haven't been able to.
Well, stuff like organ
that,
harvesting is not supported by most national governments, because people have ethical problems with it. It was like how stem cell research was illegal here for 8 years under the shrub. George W. Bush. And I heard that I heard that they predicted before they finished the Human Genome Project that there would be 120,000 genes in the human being.
I mean, it was a big debate. Some people thought it was going to be a lot more. Others thought, no, it's going to be even less than that. But that was it.
And it turned out to be 35,000, roughly?
And now it's even a lot less.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we've reduced that number, I think 24 or something.
Oh, okay.
Now get this. The Drosophila fruit fly has 14,000.
Almost as many as us.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you think about it, it's quite humbling.
Yeah.
That
we're a step away from stupid.
Well, it's humbling,
like
but
an evolutionary step.
It's also because you know that you're a lot more interesting than a fly. So it kind of shows you that the genes are less important, right?
Exactly, which is
right, because maybe for anything being alive, like even
bacteria
or whatever, maybe you have to have at least 10,000 or genes or something.
Yeah. So so this big bubble, biotech, it popped in 99 when the project was finished. They mapped it out. Nothing happened. The world didn't get saved. And like you said, that survey was done, and people are like, look, I mean, we can't stop cancer and stuff like this. And then
because, again, I'm not discounting the project. I mean, it has definitely...
it was great.
But a behavior or a disease is not... It's hard to point to something and say cause and effect, because it's going to be multifactorial.
Right.
The gene is just one aspect of it.
Yeah.
How that gene is regulated, how the environment influences the regulation of that gene is going to play a big role.
And Bruce Lipton is arguing that this whole idea of genes controlling everything has a very socially negative sort of consequence. So you have people like Richard Dawkins, or the selfish gene, or people saying the gay gene, or the cancer gene, or the angry gene. And it's sort of like this myth that we're all just kind of pre-programmed by this genetic code. So he's disagreeing with that whole view of things and saying that it's harmful. So then he gives his justification for it.
Yes, I agree with him. I mean, at one point we thought, I think it was in the 60s, there were cases in Boston where if you were born with an extra Y chromosome, then you were labeled as predetermined that you're going to be an aggressive male.
Right.
And so this was a research that was supported by NIH. So any newborn male, they had to examine their genome and see if they had, and then they put a check next to their name and track them to see what's going to happen. Now, we learned that actually it's not the Y chromosome, and that aggression is not purely determined by your genes.
Yeah.
And that research was no longer funded, I think.
Interesting.
20 years later, because of the ethical aspects.
So you can confirm or deny this right away. Bruce Lipton is saying that it was often taught in textbooks in biology that the nucleus is the command center of the cell. And he says this is completely false. If you remove it definitely holds the genetic code in the DNA of the cell. But if you remove the nucleus, he says the cell will survive, not indefinitely. It will eventually die because when the organelles will break down, and instead of being reproduced by the gene in the nucleus, they won't get reproduced, so the cell will eventually die. But he says that if you remove the nucleus, the cell will survive and do all of its functions, all of its bodily organelles will continue working for a time.
Until it runs out of genetic material.
Until something breaks down, one of its parts breaks, and it can't get a new one.
Because if it can't get the DNA, it can't create all those proteins that it needs to
do
all the other shit.
Yes, we know that's true for red blood cells. They're anucleated. They don't need the nucleus. They have a short lifespan.
Right.
I can't say that that's true for every cell. I mean, yes, you could remove it, but how long that cell is going to survive?
Yeah, I mean, what is the point?
The point is that the view was that the nucleus was the brain of the cell. Like a brain in a human being controls, all of our motion. You can't take the brain out and the humans still walk around. So I will get to the exact point, but his point is that it's...
I was just saying that in other terms, like a car. You're driving a car down the road, right?
Yeah.
Pull the fuel line. It's still going to go down the road for a while,
right?
Or pull
not long, but for a little while,
or pull the oil, oil plug and let the oil start draining out, or anything like take a wheel off or whatever. It's still going to go down the road.
Well, it's different because
and then it'll stop. It's a different time, no matter what it is.
Yeah, this is slightly different because if you take an organelle out of a cell that does something like one of our organs does. It'll do what you're saying. Maybe it'll survive for a minute, but it needs that thing. So then it eventually will break down. But the nucleus, the point is just that nucleus doesn't doesn't direct executive function. It doesn't tell the cell what to do with all of its parts. The cell can do that without the nucleus.
So again,
a lot of things
it's what the type of cell. At some point, the nucleus is the brain of that cell. At the point where that cell is becoming a cell, maturing into you need the nucleus.
Definitely, because it has the genetic information.
Right. Now, to maintain the integrity, the functionality of that cell, you need the nucleus, because that's where the genetic material. And so if you are, if it's a cell that is under, high demand where the you need to produce proteins, then yes, you will need that nucleus.
Yeah, and I think he completely agrees with that. So I guess we'll give him a
So let's keep going. Let's see where he takes it.
Okay, so he's saying the nucleus is not the brain of the cell then. So the cell, nucleus is not the command center. So what is the brain of the cell? So
the ribosomes?
he says, look, the cell is made up of proteins, over 70,000 protein parts in a cell. And proteins determine structure and the morphology of the cell. And there's 20 different amino acids which make up a protein, I guess he said.
20 base amino acids.
Yeah. And then you have inputs from the environment, in other words. So here's the cell, and it has the cell membrane. And basically what he's saying is that the cell membrane is the brain of the cell, was kind of his thesis, because it has these little proteins that stick up that are receptors. And the function of these things is to interpret signals from the environment. In other words, heat or estrogen or something, molecules.
So that's what tells it if it needs to produce something or do something, and then that the nucleus is just like a warehouse?
Yes, nucleus is a warehouse. He's saying a genetic warehouse, and the skin of it is where molecules will hit that protein, and then the cell will now know, because it's ready for that molecule on the surface there. Now it'll go in and goes through, and he said there's a receptor and an effector, and then it's sort of, the cell now knows that it has to do something.
Right, so I don't disagree with that. I mean, the integrity of the cell is maintained by the plasma membrane.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, in some cases, and so the plasma membrane is really unique. It's made up of phospholipids, but the composition of the lipid on the inner side of the membrane versus the outer side is different. And if you switch them, then that cell in some cases is destined to be degraded. In some cases of Alzheimer's, we see that that composition is changed. So without a doubt, the plasma membrane is going to serve not just as a protector, but a gateway to the cell.
And these receptors are, the only way the cell works is by receiving information from the outside.
Right.
Environmental stimuli.
Right.
And he's saying that also, that as a side note, that genes do not switch themselves on or off or reproduce themselves, that they're surrounded by proteins. And just like these cell membranes, the proteins, when a molecule hits them, then they'll change their shape, and they'll unravel the DNA, and then the gene can be switched on or off. Also, in other words, a result of environmental factors.
So is he talking about transcription factors?
Transcription factors, but I think you're going to epigenetics, no?
Yes, that's
Okay.
where we are going with this.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't wait.
And we're almost there, I think.
So like we mentioned earlier, it's fascinating. The brain is studying the brain.
Yeah.
So the DNA is giving instructions to make proteins, so those proteins can regulate the DNA. So
right. It's a circular.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was saying, like, this is maybe almost too simplistic, but he's saying if there's a cancer gene, then why don't people who have it, why don't they just have cancer when they're 5 years old or 1 year old? And he's saying that, like any other gene, there may be a gene that is correlated with cancer, but that it's environmental stimuli, in other words, molecules hitting that protein, unraveling it, and then activating the gene that make the cancer appear. So you might have the cancer gene, quote unquote, but never get cancer. And then but you might do things or have a lifestyle, in other words,
Right.
that makes the cancer come.
So scientists who work on cancer research, I mean, I don't believe any of them will say, oh, it's one gene or two genes or 10 genes.
Okay.
The environment plays a significant role. So
That's uncontroversial.
Yeah. So as a matter of fact, they've shifted. Those who work on cancer, they've shifted their effort to trying to map how the DNA is regulated. So something called methylation.
Okay.
So you have your DNA, and that DNA, it's too big to fit into the nucleus, so we have to package it somehow, and we're going to package it, wrap it around proteins, and then there is a very structural aspect to it. But then anytime you want to read that DNA to make a certain protein, you have to unwind it, and but you can add some chemicals to some regions of that DNA, and you're no longer able to read it, unwind it. The environment plays a big role in that. And that chemical is, for instance, a methyl group, right? So methylation is the process of adding that chemical group, and you end up suppressing the expression of certain genes.
And they're trying to use that strategically to
Yes.
stop the cancer gene from activating.
Well, at least to understand the pattern of methylation. Yeah.
Interesting.
So there is, I think it was Nova. They had the twin study, and what they looked at identical twins, and one of them had cancer, the other one did not. And so you think, wait a second, if it is genetics that's causing it, they're identical. And so it begs the question, do they have identical DNA?
Right.
Well, we know that changes the minute we're born because the environment influences how that DNA is regulated.
Yeah.
And so they looked at the two sisters and they mapped their genome, and indeed, they're not the same.
So, yeah, I guess this guy. So we'll see how he jumps, because these are these are true statements that he's making.
Correct.
So we'll see how he jumps to his whole
Yes.
woo woo thing. But basically, he's saying that if you remove the receptor from the membrane of a cell, it stops doing anything. In
Sure.
other words, it does what you would if the nucleus had been the brain. You would expect that when you take it out, the cell would just sit there like a dummy. But it doesn't. It keeps doing stuff until it dies.
Mm-hmm.
But if you remove the receptors, the cell does turn into a dummy. It doesn't do anything. So he's saying the membrane is the brain.
It becomes,
I mean,
I
it's
guess
an analogy because it's
semantics.
obviously not a brain.
Yeah.
But so so now he's getting a little sketchy. But he's saying that you could technically say that a cell has perception, because perception is just recognizing environmental factors and then doing something because of them. That's kind of the basic definition of perception.
But if you take away the nucleus and the receptor recognizes that there's been an invasion, that receptor is going to communicate to inside the cell to generate the appropriate defense response proteins. If the nucleus is not there,
You can't get 'em.
that perception is useless.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That goes with what he was saying, that you need that nucleus to make new parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The warehouse analogy.
Well, and that's the same thing.
But what he's saying is that but the command will still be there if it's not. They just won't be
Exactly.
able to get the parts.
Exactly.
The brain's still functioning, but it's like if you remove a part of your body that produces a certain chemical, your brain still tries to tell it to produce that chemical. It just
can't
doesn't
get it.
anymore because it's not there.
Yeah.
Well, so that would be maybe possibly like if there was a separation between your eyeballs and your brain, having a brain fart. But so your eyes might still be seeing this danger that's coming at you, but it's trying to tell your brain, "Hey, there's a big bear coming at you." But
That's a tough question.
If-
It's almost a philosophical question. Like, if you
Does your eye still see it if the nervous
does your eye
system-
still
No,
see
no,
if
right,
you
right.
don't process what if you don't perceive? That's weird.
I guess it depends on if the physical parts of the eye are damaged, because I guess it still could be seeing and trying to send a message. If there was still blood supply to those neurons
It's
up there, wouldn't
responding
they?
to the light.
Right. So do you
And
think if they were still getting blood supply and those neurons were still alive, they would still be firing? It just wouldn't get to the brain.
Right. So seeing, it's the perception.
That's the magic
Right.
part.
Yeah.
Is experiencing it as a person.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And is it true? Am I remembering right that 70% of the sensory receptors in your body are in your eyes?
Mhm.
But-
70%, man, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
But I was trying to use that to talk to. So it's still in my mind, the nucleus is more the brain than the receptor, because the receptor is more like an eyeball. Like she had said, it sees this invasion and tries to tell inside the cell, the nucleus, hey, you got to do this because this stuff's coming,
I don't think
and
that-
the nucleus isn't there, and so it doesn't do anything.
I don't think that analogy works, because it both sees it and it starts working.
well, what about this?
But
though?
It
what is-
reacts to it.
What
Right,
about
but what
this?
it-
though?
what
You
it-
can't react to of something you see if it never gets to your brain. You can't react.
So what if the cell membrane's like kind of like a weather station? Like it just detects
But it's
conditions and then
But its reaction
reports
is
on them?
telling the brain to do something. or the nucleus. I'm sorry. The reaction of the thing, the what do you call it? The response. I don't know.
Yep, the receptor.
The receptor is to tell the nucleus to do something.
Right.
It's
but
not,
if you think about it, the brain
only,
is what tells everything in the body to do something.
Yeah,
so if that's the brain of the cell and it's given the commands, and the nucleus just responds by saying, "Oh, this is what's happening, so you need these parts."
Yeah.
That's like the mechanic takes a look at it.
So
and then he communicates to the parts guy, "Oh man, I need 2 brake calipers," and that's the nucleus. He says, "Oh, here, I got your calipers
all
right
it is
here."
is a supplier.
I'm wondering if I want to see where he takes it.
Okay.
But I'm wondering if the membrane is the brain, which would be analogous to the brain, and then the nucleus would be the endocrine system. Which
So that's what makes stuff in the human body.
So the brain is monitoring how things are, and if you deviate from your homeostasis, then it's going to, in most cases, communicate or command to the endocrine system
to do something.
Release chemicals to stabilize
That's
whatever's out of homeostasis to put it back into stasis.
And you mentioned this before we started any of that, was the idea of the heart as the seat of emotion, at least, or of perception. That Aristotle's theory. And I know you're not saying that, but it's like a different idea of what's the brain and what's... Yeah. Okay, so let's see where he goes with this. In other words, so he's saying if you take the receptors away, the cell stops doing anything. It turns into an idiot. And the behavior of the cell, in other words, is dependent on the environment and the functioning of its receptors in the membrane, and not on the DNA. In other words, the genes inside the cell do not determine don't make the cell do things. They don't determine the actions of the cell. They determine the structure of the cell and what's in it. But the genes aren't in other words, the command center.
They're the prime, but they're the prime mover, if you will. I mean,
they make it what it is.
Yeah, they make it. They give it an identity. They make it into a liver cell or a muscle cell, and so,
But I think I almost had my head wrapped around this.
And true. I mean, it is.
Well,
it is.
I think that's a sort of a bad analogy with the cell to the body, just because you have way more parts in your body than in a cell. So try to say that, then this is the brain and this is the eyes and this, you know what I mean? There's I think a lot of those parts do different jobs. If you're going to try to compare them.
Well, they do. That's why I mentioned organelles. So they're in the cell. There's these little glob things that do things. They
but what I'm saying is, so the human body.
Right.
Do we want to find count all the organs and every respiratory system and every single thing, and then try to match them up to the cell? Because I think there's way more parts in the human body than there are in a cell.
You're right. It's obviously a microcosm, if anything. But he's just he is using it as an analogy because he does want to say that cells perceive things just like we do. So you're right that the analogy might be stretched, but we'll have to see.
I mean, so far he hasn't said anything that is wrong or false. He's taken the facts and then he's putting a spin on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I hear him saying is that the DNA tells the cell what it's going to do, and it makes the cell what it is, but it's not what makes it do what it does
in real time.
Right.
Right.
Just like the brain didn't, the brain's not what made your cells differentiate into the brain itself from that egg as you go through mitosis, and then the 3 types of initial tissues, the mesoform, the end of all that, and and it differentiates into the different tissues. It's not the brain telling it to do that.
It's hormones. Yeah.
So he's saying that how do we change our genes then, or the expression of our genes, in other words? And he's saying that the conventional belief in what is that only random mutations can change your genes, the structure of your DNA, or switch them on or off. Well, no, not that. But random mutations are the only way to change your genetic code once you're alive, once you're a person. Mm-hmm. And he's saying instead he uses this term adaptive mutation and says that genes are like cells. They're adjusting to inputs and changing. So here's the payoff, which you've already seen it coming, I think, is that he's saying that it's just like a cell perceives things, perception controls, in many ways, our genes through the epigenetic process. In other words, the choices that you make in your life and the environments you go into have an effect on the expression or even the structure of your DNA. And that, in other words, that since perception is intimately linked with belief, because belief is like all it is like perception down the road a little bit. It's perception, and then you thought about it and you came to a conclusion. So beliefs are kind of like abstractions of perceptions. So that's the payoff. In other words, that your perceptions change your body through environmental stimuli, and that therefore your beliefs have an effect on the expression of your genes. And this is his biology of belief. Signals. All action on the cellular level, he says, is caused by the environment that the cells are in. All action, their environment, which is inside the body or on the skin, and likewise. So in other words, environmental. So what you eat, how cold it is outside, and other things which are related to belief and the way you go through life. So I think that's. So I don't know if I've just done it justice, but that's his.
So I mean, it's a sound analogy. My only problem with it is it can't be black and white. In other words, there are genes that it doesn't matter what the environment is going to be, whether you're happy or sad. You know, the genes that maintain your eye color are going to still work. So certain genes are
have there been changes in eye color over the lifetime of an individual? Can eye color ever
bad
change?
Example, I guess. Yes.
Because that has happened.
Yeah. So,
but almost never does. Though.
What I'm saying is there are genes that are not dependent on the environment. Okay. However.
Okay.
Well, so like you could use skin color though, pigmentation. I mean, a black dude's not going to turn into a white dude because he continuously believes he's going to be white.
Well, there's that guy that
or vice versa.
Vitiligo.
There's that guy,
or vice versa. I can't change my skin color by thinking about it.
And his skin turned blue.
Yeah, but that's physiological too. Like it's not. He didn't have to believe that would happen.
Right.
And hypnosis has huge effects on the skin. You can tell a person who's very suggestible that there's a burn on their hand, and you wipe water on the spot, and you say it's acid. And you say there's a burn is going to develop here. Burn develops over the next couple of days. They get a burn on it. It's happened. It's documented. It's just doesn't usually work, but on some people it does.
But. So to get back to his point, yes, he's right in that certain genes are heavily influenced by the environment. And so if you...
What would you say would be like the best example of that?
And
mental illness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So mental illness, which we know very little about, stress is going to... play a big role, significant role in whether you display the behavior or not, which means whether you express or not express certain genes.
Very true. Yeah. Like if you're bipolar or depressed or something and someone screams at you at work, that's going to have a huge effect. You could go to slide down a downward spiral right there. Yeah.
If that almost lends more credence to or at least a little to the like the biology of belief, because you can do, like, if you have behavioral issues, a lot of different kinds of therapy where you just cognitive therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy where you just train your mind.
Yeah.
And so, that would tend to lend that a little bit of credence, because I've seen that stuff work real good, especially the dialectical behavioral therapy, like mindfulness training and
I guess got really, when I heard that theory, I thought about the research I had done previously on hypnosis and skin problems, and the weird way, like hypnosis doesn't cure cancer almost ever, but they have done surgical procedures with hypnosis, in other words, no anesthetic, and they've cut people open, and the person was fine, didn't scream, didn't sweat, no pain. But it's only
Yeah, I
that
mean-
very small minority of people.
Didn't you tell me about the guy that is able to reduce his body temperature?
Yeah,
or
that-
slow? Yeah.
That army sniper, I watched him on like the most dangerous weapons or most dangerous warrior, and they put him in like this box under these extreme conditions, and once he was buried in ice, and he over 30 minutes he was buried in ice. He shot every time between heartbeats. He reduced his heart rate to like something ridiculous, man. I almost want to say like 12 beats a minute. It was something stupid. His breathing was completely reduced, but he raised his body temperature under the ice. When they put him in the one where he was in the heat, he lowered his body temperature over that same time.
These Buddhist monks who it sounds almost like a cliche, but there are the guys out there who they've done some studies on, and they were able to do the same thing, even to a greater extent. I think this one guy, they said his heart wasn't beating for a couple minutes, and then it would just like thump, and like once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even under stressful conditions, this guy every single time shot between heartbeats.
Well, these guys are up on these mountains in Tibet wearing nothing but a rag and sitting there, and it's like 5 degrees outside.
Wasn't there a study done about the oxygen content of the blood of the Sherpas? Like it's higher because they live at those high altitudes all the time. So there's another example of that's epigenetics, like the environment affecting.
Well, it could
no,
be
that's
normal genetics.
That's just
because it's
yeah.
generation
so
after
epigenetics
generation.
is when there's a change. Like that
change
little girl
during a lifetime.
That little girl we talked about, where she climbed like the monkeys, and her hands and feet developed differently. Like
Yeah,
that.
but if I don't know if that's a genetic change. Epigenetics, technically, I
Well,
think I'm
now
right.
if her kid's born like that, though,
Then that would be an epigenetic.
Well, I mean, epigenetic is you don't change the code. You don't change the letters.
you just change
but
the way it
you
expresses.
change your accessibility to those letters.
What goes on and off?
What goes on and off.
Okay.
All right. You have to be able to bind to that region in order to read the region. But if you can't because it's blocked, then you're not going to be able to express anything. Now, you can pass on that regulatory mechanism down to your to the offspring. But it's still epigenetic.
So you pass on something that isn't genetic to the offspring?
Yeah, so there was the Irish famine
1860 50.
study where they looked at, let's see if I recall. So they looked at mothers who were pregnant, and they went through starvation, and they tracked down the newborns to see, and they saw that they had, the code did not change, but the expression of the code changed. But then in the third generation, it reversed back to the way it was.
Once they had some food, once the famine was over?
Well, not just once the famine was over. So it would be, I experienced the starvation, and so my genes were, or the accessibility of the protein to the gene were altered. And that's what I passed on. Now, my children lived through, again, they couldn't access the genes. And their children, it reversed back to the way it was for me before the starvation.
Huh. That's interesting.
So
have they
here's
done
an
any
example
studies like that
of,
with the European Jewish population?
I'm not sure.
You mean from the Holocaust?
Yeah.
I think
they
it was
certainly experienced
but
starvation.
it was such a short period of time. It was only 3 years probably that was going on. So that it probably would be hard to.
So I mean,
a lot
this
of
is an
them
example where the
didn't get to have
environment
kids.
influences the expression, but you could reverse that influence.
Once the environment changes.
Right.
There's a weird thing. If you've ever heard of false pregnancies, women who aren't pregnant get
Seen it
pregnant.
in psych,
Yeah.
or not. But I haven't seen them like get pregnant, but I've seen them start lactating.
Yeah, lactating, they get the bump, the belly, it starts expanding, and they stop having their period. Like it's basically like a doctor would be like, yeah, you're pregnant, unless you did a blood test and
Right.
found out that you're not. And that this is a thing that happens, not frequently, but it's out there.
I remember a girl we did pregnancy tests like 3 a week just to try to convince her, but it was,
Yeah.
But so then what happens? 9 months come along and
They give birth to a Carl's Jr. burger.
yeah.
Nothing. They just, I don't know, they stay pregnant or they get over it. Someone convinces them.
They eventually end up on court order and they
Yeah.
get shot up with enough Haldol to where they stop believing it and then things go back to normal. That's the sad truth of it.
Besides
or they actually get pregnant from a guard or something.
Yeah, that's...
Besides being a scientist, you're also a teacher.
Yes.
So you have a lot of interesting opinions on higher education and the sort of the lowering standards. Now, I want to make a confession to you right now.
This is going to be awesome.
About my job, what I do for a living.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, I got my master's degree in philosophy in Scotland in 2005. And ever since then, I've just been like a bartender and just a scumbag, basically. But I've always been very academic and reading and writing and everything. But so I was out of work last year, and the only job I could find was I really wanted a writing job. It's something I could do from home. So out of nowhere, this opportunity came on Craigslist, and I signed up with a company where I'm an independent contractor. Students go on to this company and put their papers up.
Oh boy!
And they get writers like me to write a completely original paper. So it's not technically plagiarism actually, because it's with my permission. Because plagiarism is when you use someone else's writing without their permission. But so it's actually technically not. It's not illegal, but it's
so
unethical.
semantically,
Right.
yes, yeah, right.
And
so
I agree. Right, there's not going to be no argument.
So
Yeah.
I describe John as a professional cheater.
Yeah. I mean, I've never cheated.
Well, he's not
but
the one.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
I'm helping someone
Well,
else.
who's the cheater? Is it the
you're a
equipment manager, or
facilitator.
is it Tom Brady, or is it both of them?
I'm the football.
Yeah, well, somebody facilitated the cheating.
I'm the deflated
Well,
football.
you're letting the air. You're the guy letting the air out of the football.
Yeah.
You're like, here, throw this.
Yeah. I'm not in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're still part of the process.
Oh, I'm a big part of it.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, it's the only way that I can get by right now, and I don't make a lot of money. I probably get like $10 a page. So Monday through Friday, I write these long, 10-page, 35-page theses. I now, since last show, I've gotten a bachelor's degree in cinema, basically, because I wrote a 35-page thesis on documentaries. Now,
you have an unofficial degree in business too, right? Didn't you do a whole business
I have an
degree?
MBA. I did a dude's all of his assignments in business. Now,
What did he do, surf?
yeah.
That's so fucked up, man.
He was in the Air Force, actually, in Japan. You're not supposed to know any details, but they slip out when you're talking online and stuff
Right.
with them. But anyway, so I don't like what I do, but it's what I do because I get to work from home in my underwear and just on my own time.
It's getting creepy.
But so, and I've done like 350 papers. Maybe 3 of those were little biology things where they had to like summarize something because I don't know the science. So science students can't really use this service. By the way, it doesn't really happen. Like nursing I've done a few papers for that, but it's never like important clinical work.
You know what?
It's
Honestly,
just like summary of what you learned for that semester or something.
The papers you told me about those, like for the nursing students, I'm almost betting you that's some end of the semester
It is.
extra credit shit.
Yeah.
Like it's that little thing you ask for on Tuesday. You're like, bring this back next Tuesday, and you'll get 5 extra credit points, and they need that.
Well, like
to keep that
it's
B
like
average.
it's like
So
write a
that's kind of
5-page.
what you're getting from them. I
It's
think.
like write a 5-page paper on how you've achieved the learning objectives from this course. It's not like how should I administer insulin, and I'm just blah, 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 and this nurse is never learning how to do that. So it's not like that. And very few science papers. So to ease your mind a little bit, it's mostly liberal arts stuff.
No, I mean, you're telling me this, and I'm thinking that is sad because all of your work,
I know.
it's original, should be compiled into a book or
Yeah. And I've completely lost the right to do that legally. I've signed it away to the company. I can never publish any of these things. And I've written some really interesting. So it's a segment that we do on the show as a paper of the week. And so I'll briefly describe some stuff I did this week. I did a 10-page paper on automotive design, which was kind of interesting. How the bodies of cars have evolved over time. And the thesis of this book that I was reviewing was that basically car evolution, body style stopped in 1950, and that all it's been since then is recycling
yeah.
old ideas, from older cars. And it was kind of interesting. During World War II, for 3 years, Ford, they weren't allowed. They didn't produce a single car. There were no new models. There's no 1944 Ford, Escort or whatever it was back then. They had to stop and make tanks. That was a different world back then. Imagine the government telling major corporations today to stop making their product and make shit for us because it's a war. Different times.
Wow.
And the other one was a nursing paper, and it was about this thing called sentinel health effects, which are medical errors. And so I wrote a paper on this, and I had
geez, I would think that nurse would need to know it.
Yeah, this one was a little sketchy.
Yeah.
I had to pick two major common medical errors and write about them. And it turns out the most common medical error is RFOs, retained foreign objects. And every 1,000 abdominal surgeries, something gets left in the dude's corpse in his body. And 1 in every 18,000 surgeries period, you'll get something dropped in there, and they sew you back up, and then they do an equipment count, and it's not there, and then they send you to radiology to find out where the scissors are inside you. So, but there are ways to really reduce that, and it's all about like equipment counts. So I wrote a detailed thing on how you put up a whiteboard, and everybody looks at it and you confirm with each other, how many fucking scissors are there and everything. The other sentinel health effect was inpatient suicide, which is very common in medical units. And you can't predict it by prior psychiatric diagnoses because it's acute factors which lead to medical inpatient suicides. In other words, like pain and the diagnosis itself.
Yeah.
And it's usually men, like all suicides, it's predominantly men, older men. And a lot of times they feel like they've lost their job and their family and stuff. So and the most common method is hanging oneself in the bathroom. And then the second most is jumping out the window. It was really morbid. And then that anyway.
Yeah, I always used to think it was like St. Mary's there, psych unit was on the 4th floor for a while. And I always used to think, man, I don't know if that's the best. That's the best plan. But if you think about it, like when you worked at Palo Verde, you remember doors on the bathrooms?
No, yeah.
No bathroom doors.
And the doors themselves to the rooms were easily pushed open.
Well, we put them, we had two-way doors. You could flip a little switch from the outside. So if somebody barricaded, we just flipped the switch and open it the other way.
So, Dr. Mays, talk to me about lowering academic standards, academic integrity, and the struggles you've had.
So I don't know. I honestly don't know where to start. I mean, we get students to start first year university, and so many times I thought, how did you get here?
They can't string a sentence together.
They cannot.
And this I know firsthand.
Okay. Because
they communicate with me, and they're like, "Do you paper write for me this?" I'm like, "Wow."
And
how are you going to get this? How are you going to sneak this by the professor?
Yeah.
Like, I'll dumb it down, but
they do. They do. I mean, because
you can't prove it.
Because we've lowered. I mean, the state of higher education is devastating, to say the least. We've lowered the standard. We're essentially cheating the students. So we send them off to college. They get to college, and we see that they can't write a sentence or do a simple math equation. And so I, as a teacher, I'm going to lower the standards because everyone else is lowering the standard. And the student takes my class, and they get an A. And then they go to a higher level class, but they happen to go to a higher level class with an instructor who refuses to lower the standards, and they can't pass the class to save their lives. And I've had students like that who would say to me, but I don't understand. I've gotten A's in my previous classes, and I think, I don't know how you would get a D in your previous classes.
Yeah.
As a teacher, you're able to tell whether the person didn't study or they have no clue.
They tried, and they just don't know what the words mean.
Right. So, so the students graduate with this massive debt, and they're unable to use the degree that they received because it's a degree on paper.
Yeah.
Okay. So I see it with my students, and I don't blame the students because we expect too much.
Have you gotten
A lot
pressure?
of them are working. A lot of them they have to take student loans, and a lot of them, we just pack so much into a classroom material. There's only so much processing you can do in one semester.
So if 3/4 of your class is failing, do you get pressure from the administration to dumb it down?
I haven't gotten pressure from the administration. No.
Have you had that many students fail? Half? 3/4?
No.
Yeah.
Half or 3/4. No, I haven't had that. But I guess I have a reputation of being tough.
Yeah.
And then I go to national meetings and I think, I am mediocre. I'm not tough.
You're right in the middle.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, so, it's sad. I tell my students, I said, if you go to a class and the teacher is going to be easy, run the
Yeah.
other way. You have to be invested in your own education. I remember the first time I realized that an instructor did not challenge me. I felt let down. I thought, did he not think I was capable? Or was he too lazy to invest the time in
Yeah.
you know?
I tended to get bad grades in those classes in college. I got a couple C's maybe. I usually got good grades, but the C's I got were in classes that I was falling at, like communications. The guy was just talking about syllables and how they're different in different languages, which actually is kind of interesting to me now. But back then I was involved in philosophy and I was doing philosophy of language via Wittgenstein, and this guy was talking about language on this rudimentary level, and I was an asshole. I would raise my hand and be like, what's the theoretical basis for that? And he would just be like, shut up, this is the class. And I got like a C in communications because I was stuck up, but I was bored too.
I'm reminded of David Foster Wallace,
Yeah.
where he talks about, it was actually at the U of A when he was doing graduate school,
Yeah.
and he writes about it in one of his books, and he says, it was in agony to be sitting, and I'm thinking, I should be teaching you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not that smart because that guy was a genius.
Yeah. So we have so many times I look at the material and I think, how am I going to cover all of this?
Yeah.
And so what you end up doing is giving the students stuff they have to do on their own.
Yeah.
And you have to speak fast, and and the whole aspect, we stopped teaching using the Socratic method. And that is a tragedy, I think.
Asking questions and leading them on a logical trail.
Yeah, we just spoon feed. Yeah. Students are sitting and they're copying. They don't even copy down now because we provide them with the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And they don't develop. You don't give them the opportunity to develop. And so we're interested in this mass production. How many graduates do we have?
Because it's for profit.
Yes. So,
and that's been on during the advent of like the Ames tests and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So like since
standardized testing.
Standardized testing as it's become more important, then it seems like that's what's happening with school, and it's weird to me because so at the lower grades, how are they passing these tests? These standardized tests.
You teach to the test.
You just teach to the test,
Yeah.
and they don't know any real information.
Yeah.
They probably learn a little bit that's on the test that's useful, but
and the retention is a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, when you do this fast study before the test because you don't have the time, then you can't retain it.
Cramming, yeah. Bryan, can we tear you away from your phone?
I'm trying to find something that she wrote a long time
And
ago
then-
about
the
academic
email?
integrity.
Yeah.
And
I can't find
And then
it.
I have a question. because I've got a lot of friends that are teachers as well in college and high school and grade school and whatever. And my contention a lot of times now, especially today and how education is today, I think, like you were just saying earlier about not teaching the Socratic method and just spoon feeding people stuff, especially college. College used to be not for everyone. Like people would, go into industry and go into other jobs, but it's become, America now is more like, well, we don't have those jobs, it's factory jobs. So you need to go to college to get this degree in this thing that then you're going to be.
That used to guarantee you a job.
Right. Well, and a job in something interesting or different or whatever, not working in an office and pushing paper.
Right.
But that's like what you go to college now for. Is like then you can.
It's similar to
Houghton Mifflin and work for.
It's similar to Saudi Arabia, where like 70% of them, everyone goes to school, all these men, and 70% of them go take religious studies. So there's these tens of millions of young men who have degrees in religious studies. And then they don't need any religious studies teachers because there's millions of them. So the government gives these guys like a 1 day a week job teaching, and they give them like $50,000 a year. The government just hands money to the people, oil revenues, to keep the economy, quote unquote, rolling.
But then it seems like the role of education now is more about teaching people to sit at a desk,
conform,
get information spoon fed, and then pump that out. Whatever,
conform, cram and dump.
I memorize and pump it out. Yeah.
Yes, we don't teach them. I mean, to me, part of being a teacher is not just delivering the material. Anyone can open a book and read.
Yeah,
but also teaching them how to become better citizens, how to engage in an analytical debate,
critical thinking.
Critical thinking, to challenge the system, to just
ask questions.
I know, and we just don't have that luxury.
I'll tell you what I noticed going back to school as an older person is a lack of accountability on the students' part. They don't expect. There was a particular girl that struggled in the A&P class that I took with you, and she came to our study group a few times, and she said, I feel like I'm in the wrong group, like I don't belong in here with you guys. And she came back for the second semester, and the first thing she did when she sat down in the class, and it's a hard class, man, is get out her phone again. And I'm like, maybe you get a better grade if you weren't on your phone the whole class.
It makes me mad.
And then I watched a lot of people in the back, and I'm not a rat, it ain't my business to tell anybody, but I watched a lot of people in the back of classes, and not just yours, on their phones, like Googling shit during the class, under the table. You don't even know what's being taught.
You only have to be here for an hour.
Yeah, well, those were 3-hour classes, but I mean,
once a week, right?
You bitch because the class is hard, but you're going to be in the healthcare profession, and the class should be hard, man.
Yeah.
You're going to be saving people's lives. I don't want boneheads doing that.
I don't know how I could pass a science class without paying a lot of attention.
Because they like there was a thing at the end of your test too. It said what grade do you think you earned, and that question fucking baffled me. I remember exactly what I answered.
Brian's there's nothing over A, so what can I say?
I said, I remember how I answered it. I said, well, I earned whatever I got. Like, that's what grade I feel like I earned.
But what's interesting is that the way my top students answer the question is they're so humble and a B, or, like my A+ students would say, I'm hoping I made a B, or I earned whatever grade I got. And then the students that are they don't even have a D. They say, between a B and a C or a B, I'm hoping for an A-. And I think there is a disconnect between
it's interesting
where they are and, reality and what they think.
Yeah, there's been a lot of studies on that when you let students grade their own papers and stuff. When they grade each other's papers, I think they're pretty fair. But when they grade their own, they're very strict, and they give themselves lower grades than the teacher would. Yeah. It's interesting. Wonder what that means. Our new segment, Anger Management with Bryan Richter. Bryan, what do you got for us this week?
This is old, man. Like, my wife reminded me of this one last week because she was actually in the car with me when this happened. We lived up in the foothills, and I was coming down Craycroft to bring her to work. And I got to Craycroft and Grant right out in front of TMC. Well, I'm coming down that way anyway. And this guy's tailgating me, like, all the way down the road, like, ridiculously close, too. Like, I've slammed on my brakes a couple times. Like, we've had some gestures back and forth. And traffic's pretty backed up because of that Fort Lowell soccer camp that's out there.
Yeah.
So it takes us a couple lights to get through. Well, I've already leaned out the window and yelled at him. He's behind me.
What did you yell at him?
Like, back the fuck off, get off my ass. Like, just the normal stuff. Like,
lean away from the mic and do it like it actually was.
No, I don't want to get
I want the people at home to know the true Bryan Richter.
Yeah, because your buddy A, right? He thinks I'm all level-headed. Well, I'll snap sometimes. So I'm trying to keep it together because she's going to work and I'm going to work. But I'm fucking mad.
Yeah.
And so we pull up to the red light, and I'm in the left turn lane, and he's still right behind me. And after all this gesturing and all this slamming on the brakes and all this trading words, he fucking bumps into the back of my car with his car.
Oh.
Completely out of the question.
So she puts her hand on my leg. She says, "Baby," and I'm like, I move the hand up. I engage the emergency brake. I drop it out of gear. I pop out of the car. I go walking back. Right.
Yeah.
So I already know what I'm going to do when I get back there because I'm that mad. And so as I'm walking up, he starts talking to me, and I can tell that he is fucking ripped drunk.
Oh, jeez.
So he's slurring his words, and he's got his head kind of leaned out the window. So I don't even say anything to him. I'm just smiling at him. I walk up to him. I grab him by the hair on the top of the head.
Is he still in the seat?
He's still in his car.
Window down?
Window down. He's talking to me out the window, and he's a little ornery, but not much. But I'm so hostile right now. I'm not even saying anything. He's, dude, I'm sorry, man. What the fuck? Like, get back in your fucking car. So I grab the hair on the top of his head. I slam his head down on the door, and then I just start punching him in the face.
Oh,
just
damn.
over and over, dude. I hit him till he's knocked out.
Oh.
And then
Aggravated assault.
I hit him like 3-4 times with his head pinned against the car. I punch him till he's not moving.
Is there any other traffic?
Oh, there's people behind him. There's people
God.
beside us.
Yeah,
like I'm in the left turn lane in a fucking traffic jam. So I just got him by the hair. I slammed his face a few times, and I remember seeing like his head laying there and bloody drool running down the door. And so I just walked back to my car and get in, and it was amazing. Like the light, the arrow came on, and I just turned away, and he's just sitting there like knocked out in the car. Behind me. But Christine said, you should tell that one next week because I forgot she was even there. But, yeah.
I'm surprised she stayed. I would have just left the car, started walking. I don't know this guy.
If you were his wife.
Yes.
No,
that kind of behavior doesn't fly in.
She's been there for
Baghdad.
for a couple incidents where I got pretty hostile with people.
Yeah, she's a good wife and loyal.
She is the pretty
partner.
girl that will jump on your back if you get position on me in a street fight. She'll jump on your back. She ain't too pretty.
Oh man, that was great, guys. We packed it in. Does anyone else want to bring anything up? We're at 1 hour and 36.
Oh, I was going to ask. So we were talking earlier about the mind-body thing,
yes.
and how basically in science, I think it was Catholic Church, maybe Roman Church, the original Roman Church, that said that there was a separation between
the physical and
non-physical.
I'm sure they still believe that,
or the mind-body, and that's like,
They kind of have to, don't
Right.
they?
and then that's what influenced Western medicine. Whereas in Eastern medicine, like you were saying, they kind of think it's more combined. It's more a combination of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Everything is kind of in line.
I believe in mind-body dualism, the strict philosophical ideal of this physical and non-physical dualism, where they're both completely distinct, is from Descartes, the French philosopher of the 1530s or so. He was the first one. He was the one who said, "I think, therefore I am," because he was dealing with the skeptical problem, which is how can I know anything if I might be dreaming? So his answer was, well, we can at least know that I exist, because even if I'm dreaming, I'm still someone. So thinking is its own evidence, and that's the sort of one thing we can know. And then he deduced some further things that you can know that ended up being incorrect or philosophically dubious. But he was a scientist too, and this guy turned the corner for almost everyone, because he was one of the first scientists as we would recognize them, doing these empirical experiments with verified, facts and equipment and everything. But he was also a philosopher, and so he ushered in this era of objective sort of modern science, as well as that philosophical concept. But that was 1500, so maybe the Catholic Church was already dealing with, because I'm sure dualism predates Descartes.
Yeah, what I think I'm talking about is when they were trying to figure out the soul, and I think they equated the soul with more your mind,
Yep.
these non-physical
Definitely
type things, and they're trying to.
And it probably
basically say your soul was separate from your body.
Yes,
and so
that when you died,
right.
it could survive and go on.
Right, and so then any physical things that are happening to your body, you need to deal with as one thing rather than. Well, it's separate from your mind, soul.
That separation led them to despise the body, and so a lot of Christian doctrine is about denying the desires, denying physical comfort. So those monks would sleep on a piece of wood and eat slop, and it was all about denying the sensations of the body in order to strengthen the soul and the mind. So that's this hostility.
Suffering builds.
Yeah, the hostility in Christianity to physical desires and physical things of all kind dates back to that doctrine, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got something.
Yeah.
That thing I was looking for. Like, I remember a lot of it. There was like the responsibility of teaching.
An email you got from Dr. Mays?
From you, yeah.
Oh,
where there was a lot of complaining because the test was too hard. The test was too hard. And it was a weird thing because I felt like it was the easiest one that I had taken from you yet. Because normally I would be like, I can't stand this woman. There was at least 2 weeks of the month where I'm like, I don't ever want to see her again.
It's too hard.
It's ridiculous. What she's expecting us to know is ridiculous.
And your learning process, which is just memorize the entire textbook. That's what you do to learn.
Well,
he doesn't?
I visualize it too. Like
that too.
I try to wrap my head around it, but I'm like, no, don't apologize to any of these fucking bums. Like, do what you do. Keep it hard. Like, and you wrote me back something about how your teachers, you were fortunate to have good teachers, and I remember the words. They instilled in me a rigorous sense of wonder about the universe that's bound by all these exquisite laws that we don't even understand yet. That it was so beautiful and inspiring to me, and the learning was so inspiring to me, and it was so important to me that I can't give away A's. I can't do multiple choice tests. I can't be that way because of the responsibility you bear to the student and to the knowledge. And that if you water that down, that you're disrespecting the student, you're disrespecting the knowledge, you're disrespecting all your teachers. And it wasn't even in those words, but like that, it was your responsibility to knowledge itself to keep. And I gotta say, like, I was just gonna blow through school. I really was. I was just gonna blow through it. I was gonna do exactly what he was talking about, and I was going to just memorize everything and cram and dump and fucking forget about it. And I remember after one of those classes, that pharmacy kid was saying, he's like, oh, nobody's going to remember this shit anyway when we're out of this class. And Tony's like, he's going to remember it, dude. Like, this guy's going to remember
after
it.
every class, Bryan comes to jiu-jitsu and just starts telling people what he learned and how interesting it is. And it is. He makes people interested in it. It makes you want to I want to go study lipids or something.
I remember reading one of his essays, and I was taking a road trip with my sister. She's driving, and I'm reading it, and I'm smiling just ear to ear. And she said, "What?" And I said, his writing is poetic, and he has a visceral understanding of electrophysiology. Not an easy thing.
Yeah.
Such that at one point I thought, he answered it better than I would.
Wow.
And when you see your student surpass you, there's just nothing better than that.
But that had a lot to do with you too, because that's your thing. Like, neurophysiology was your thing, so you taught that very passionately.
Yeah.
Like, and I sometimes I'd just be laughing at you. Like, I'd see you up there talking, and you'd be standing, like, have some weird pose where you'd be pulling your own hair and pointing at the screen, and I'm like, she's in this so deep. Like, she's not even in the physical world. Like, that's why That's why I took this class again. That's why when all the guys I was taking 201 with, they're like, "You're not fucking taking her for 202, are you? You're fucking insane." And I'm like, "No, I already signed up, man. Like, I think I was the first person in that 202 class."
Yeah. And I owe it to my teachers. It's that sense of wonder. So I went from philosophy to hard basic science, and then I was fascinated by electrophysiology.
Yeah,
because it
Just
was
this whole other world.
It is
really,
fascinating.
Yeah.
but I didn't have physics.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have the background, and I remember reading it, and I thought, I love it, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
And then I remember telling myself, I have no choice. And I started looking at everything as electrons.
Yeah.
Like
That's-
I look at you and I see electrons.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're like Neo in the Matrix. But it inspired me, like, to keep learning. Like, you told me I was going to waste myself on dental hygiene, that I should do something bigger. And it's weird because what I found that I got interested in wasn't science at all. It was history.
Yeah.
And I've been devouring it, man.
Well, I think
Just-
the real turning point in education and learning comes when you transcend the desire for knowledge and you start to develop the desire for wisdom. Because facts and truths are only one aspect of learning and existence. And the desire for wisdom sometimes goes beyond the truth or excludes the truth in certain cases. And that's what philosophy is. It's not as much concerned with truths or facts. It's concerned with a priori judgments or judgments that you can make without observation or empirical testing, and that it's completely unscientific. And I hate it how philosophers in most universities are trying to pretend to be scientists now, because science is what's respected. Philosophy is, no one even knows what it is. Like most normal people don't know what the word means or what the study of it is. But I think philosophers should
I
stay.
think the wise man knows what.
I told you what I think philosophy is. Philosophy is the foundation of science. It's nothing starts without a question, and philosophers are the ones who have always asked the questions.
Well-
So they get that knowledge ball rolling because it's that rigorous wonder. I think all science is based in philosophy, because the people who really discover this shit, the big brains that do the things that just fucking amaze you,
Ask
they wanted to
questions.
know the answers to things, and so they went looking for them. And like what Maze was talking about before the show, where so much of your lab work, you have these hypotheses, and all the time, like, you test them out and it's not right. And just think of how brilliant and how much like yearning for knowledge these people who did find the answers had, how many
And how
failed.
all of the original scientists were called natural philosophers, and that wasn't just an old term that's changed. They did practice philosophy, like Descartes. He was asking, how can I know anything, at the same time that he was pouring shit into a beaker and boiling it or whatever you guys do.
The guy, was it Pasteur, who inoculated himself with the virus?
Yeah.
Fuck the balls of that guy.
I know.
You know how big his balls are, man? Like, we're sitting here thinking about how big Chris Kyle's balls were, but fucking Pasteur's balls were huge.
Yeah, well,
Huge.
yeah,
Like,
but
he had a wagon behind him carrying those things.
but it
dude.
was him or one of the other early inoculation guys who they had to get village children to do the test on after they did it to themselves.
He was one of those.
He asked the parents. He's like, "Can
Ooh,
I get
lucky-
some kids?"
lucky it worked.
And I think a couple of them died, though, dude. Mostly it worked,
Well,
but
yeah.
he didn't know if it would. You got to get these kids in their little britches, and
Every time
Jenny
you talk
McCarthy
about
wasn't
kids,
wrong
and
there.
I just think of Mengele, man, right now.
Let's not even.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Ugh. So,
All right,
but
guys.
again, thanks for the inspiration. Like,
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mays, for joining us. I
My
think it was
pleasure.
a great episode, a great show, and I'm sorry, I think I talked too much again. I'll work on it. I hope you guys are enjoying the show. Share it if you're listening to it. I know there's like 50 people out there listening to this damn thing. Share it on your social media and just say, hey, I really like this podcast. And then all of your friends will see that, and then maybe they'll listen to it.
Then they'll listen to it and think you're an idiot.
Yes. So that's all I ask, and give us suggestions and suggest guests, suggest
and
topics.
for the ladies listening who asked for more girls, like 2 in a row, man.
Yeah,
2 in a row.
and we're gonna keep it rolling with
Yeah.
the female train because
Yeah.
we need that.
Next week, too?
Will you ask Allie for
No,
me?
but
I will.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right. I got another good one, dude. Cellular biology.
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you all. That was episode 14, I think 13.
Next week is no pants week.
Yeah, we're not wearing pants next week.
It's going to be that temperature when no pants are the best pants.
Oh, man. All right. I guess that's it. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but have a great week, everybody. And that was the Radical Agnostic. Bye-bye.